Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to talk about two SIDs, and I'm going to refer to them both a little bit as I talk about each one, but is there a slide before that? Yeah. Okay. So the conversation we had when the resolution of intent to create was on the consent agenda, there was Tom Repsis, Councilmember Repsis, made a motion regarding the SIDs and had a few votes. So I wanted to at least hit on the gravel street program so that you guys have some background as to why we're doing these. And then we'll go into the specifics of these two. So just a little bit of history. In 2017, we did start this gravel streets program. The idea was threefold. One is we have an MS4 permit, which is our stormwater permit. And within that, we need to do best management practices for tracking onto streets and for sedimentation that goes into our storm drainage. So part of getting rid of the gravel streets is to make sure that we're meeting that MS4 permit. The second thing is maintenance costs for gravel versus paved are really high. So we spend a lot of time on our maintenance for gravel streets compared to all the other streets in town. So we do want to eventually get to a point where those don't take up quite as many of our resources. And then the last thing is we have citizens that are living in the city and are looking to be on a city standard type street, so they aren't dealing with mud and ice and dust and all those things that you wouldn't really anticipate having to deal with when you're in a city. So those were the three things that were behind that program when we started that 6 years ago. In the fall of 2023, I think it was October, we just redid the SID policy. And what we did on that one was change the corner lot assessment piece. So we used to have all corner lots paid the address side. Then we changed it that commercial and industrial paid both sides, but residential continued to only pay the address side. The idea was, as a resident, you really are only getting the benefit from one or the other street, not both. So that was what was behind that SID policy. And based on the conversation we had, I think it's probably time to re-up our conversation about this program and that policy. I would suggest doing that on a work session, possibly during our budget if you want to see that, because that is a budget line item that we do, but we could have that on a work session before the budget. I think we should discuss two things: the city versus property owner assessments, that corner lot. Historically, I've had conversations with several of you that several of you have wanted us to actually increase the city's participation in some of those just to try to encourage them getting done. And some have wanted to see a little bit less participation. So it'd be a good conversation, I think, to have regarding those assessments. And then the program parameters, I think one of the other conversations that were brought up last time was that we were doing cul-de-sacs. So initially, when we did this, it was with the intent of trying to get participation from those property owners that really wanted to participate. Instead of forcing them into places, we wanted to find the people that were ready to participate in a program like this. So one of the criteria was we wanted people to come to us and say, we want to do this SID. So of the two you see tonight, one of them was a situation where the property owners came to us. So that's why these are here, and I'll give you a little more when we actually get to those. But that's the little bit of background for that. So now we can move on to, if you don't want to ask questions about that now, we can go on to the actual ones, or we can talk about how we want to address the program as a whole. Your call.
I think you're good. Keep going.
Okay.
Oh, did you have a, I'm sorry, Councilmember Bernice did have a question.
Just real quick,
I didn't see that.
On the cul-de-sacs, or just on the charges, when you charge the SID, is it based on the length of the street that they're putting in? And on cul-de-sacs, what do you do? Because sometimes the cul-de-sac lengths are like just a few feet.
Right.
How do you differentiate between cul-de-sacs and normal street?
So every SID has the option by state law to assess several different ways. You can do it per each, you can do area, lineal footage. In this one, we did the equal amount method for almost all of them. Because they're all residences, we figure they drive on the street or use the street about as much as the other one, so, as anybody, so
okay,
we did equal amount. Okay, so the first one is Arvin Lane. This is a location, as I alluded to earlier, Hancock is one that the property owners actually approached us about. When we have one in an area, we actually try to do more than one just because we try to get that economy of scale when it comes to construction. So you can see Hancock and Arvin, these are the two we're talking about tonight. And Arvin is the one there on the left that we're going to talk about first. So the project, again, was developed because a nearby street, Hancock, asked us to look into it. We spent a lot of time on Arvin last year, a lot of time, So it's a very maintenance intensive street. It's got grade to it that just constantly we're up there working on it. So we saw that one in the area and we thought that would be a good one. Also, it's on our list of water line replacement projects because it's a 2-inch line and they really don't have any fire flow for that neighborhood. So those 3 things made us think we should probably go out and look at it. The property owners did respond to an interest survey and said they were interested. So that's why this one's here tonight. It is basically new asphalt. It's 34-foot street. There's curb, there's no sidewalk, and there are the 8-inch water line that goes through there. This is the district boundary. The 2 corner lots there are the ones they are fronted on Arvin Road and addressed on Arvin Road. So they are not paying for this. The other 4 are paying it equal per each. And these are the total costs. So the assessment's $42,000. Like I said, the water amount, the $154,000 was the big part of this project. But it's a 2-inch main and eventually needed to get replaced. So we took the opportunity here. And then the SMD funds would cover $88,000 of that. Generally, that is the curb and gutter and then the city's portion of the asphalt. There's also some valley gutter and then the ADA ramps that are on Arvin that typically fall in the city's purview anyway. And I'm not going to go through all this, but the schedule started a year ago. So that's the first time we reached out and talked to the property owners. We've had many meetings. We've been through the design. Again, we're kind of doing the new thing where we bid this now first because our cost estimates were wildly off there for a little while when we were trying to figure out what the construction industry was going to do. So we did bid this already, as you can see there. Resolution of intent was in January. Tonight's the public hearing, and we have no protests on this project. So we would start this throughout the summer, be done this fall, and then have it on taxes. So that is Arvin.
Very good. Thank you, Debbie. Council, questions for Debbie before we go to a public hearing? Councilmember Kennedy.
Debbie, would you put up the picture of the houses? And you have the 2 that are there that are corner lots, and they both access their property off of the other street. Is there any access from the Arvin Lane that you're going to pave onto those properties?
There is access on the north property, I believe, has access from that side.
There is access, but that access, do they use it? Do they not use it? Looking at it, if they're not being assessed and everyone else is that has access on the road, I'm just asking the question. If anyone accesses that road, wouldn't they be part of it?
So the way our SID policy reads is simply addressed. So if it is, now if this was commercial or industrial, yes, they would have to pay both sides. But if they're addressed off of one street or the other, that is what our policy says. That's what guides which side. So for instance, if Arvin Road comes in on an SID, they have to pay that for Arvin Road, but they don't have to pay Arvin Lane. However, if they have a driveway on that side and we need to do work on their driveway, they are assessed for that. In this case, we're not doing any driveway work or any private work for them.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. Debbie, I don't see sidewalks in here. So why are we, typically we always want to put sidewalks in. So what's the rationale of not putting sidewalks in for this property when the standard normally is to put sidewalks in?
Right. So these are both, the ones we're talking about tonight are both 40-foot right-of-ways, which is very, very narrow for trying to fit in. There's a lot of parking on both of these ones you'll see tonight. And by the time that you have a 40-foot right-of-way with parking on both sides, it gets very narrow. Also with the short cul-de-sac, we have not put sidewalk on some of those lately. If it's not on a school route, if it's not on a through street, we have not put sidewalk on some of those.
Okay, so this is an exception to our policy or standard. Do we actually have a standard policy to say sidewalks be put in, or are we making an exception here? Or is this just the department saying, no, we're not going to put sidewalks in this project?
Right, so there's no policy. There's a policy for how you build them if you're going to put them in. And we do have a standard design for like subdivisions and that sort of thing, which of course we try to put sidewalks in. Most of the SIDs that you'll see, we do put sidewalks in unless there's a situation where we just, like this one, it's not a through street, it's not on a school route. There's not a lot of room for it.
How much narrower would that make the street if they had to put sidewalks in?
It would be at least another, let's see, doing math on the fly here. You would need another 8 feet. So you would have to narrow it up about 8 feet.
So what, at 30?
So it's 34 now, you'd have to go to about 28.
28-foot street, and that's too narrow.
With parking on both sides, and we do look before we start these projects to see how much the parking's used, and in both of the cases tonight, parking is very, very common on these streets.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. Other questions for Debi? Any other question for Debi? Don't see any, so thank you, Debi. We'll open up for public hearing. This is a public hearing on item number 2, the SID 1426 for Urban Lane. If anybody would like to comment, please come to the podium now. Just tell us your name and address and keep your comments to 3 minutes, please.